our ongoing struggle for reclaiming the Quranic principle of justice and anti-oppression. Professor Idrisa Pandit is an independent scholar activist. That's how she would like to be sort of described. She is a native of Kashmir, for those of you who don't know her, and has lived in the United States and Canada for over 3 decades now. Professor Pandit received her Bachelor and Master of Arts from the University of Kashmir, and she subsequently completed her doctoral and postdoctoral studies from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in the United States. She's an interdisciplinary studies scholar, and her current teaching and research interests include Islam and Muslims, interfaith relations, peace building, anti-racism, and the Kashmir conflict. She has served in a variety of academic and administrative leadership positions in Kashmir, the United States, and Canada. She is currently an adjunct faculty at Luther University College, Wilfrid Laurier University, Canada. And she has previously served as the Associate Professor and Director of the Studies in Islam program at the University of Waterloo, again in Canada. Besides being an academic, she is passionate about issues of social justice and serves on boards of various community organizations. She is the recipient of various awards, including the University of Waterloo's first ever Community Impact Award, etc., etc. And in 2007, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women named Professor Pandit as one of the top 20 Muslim women who inspire. And she certainly is very inspiring. And the fact that she could imagine a course of action around the early 90s, and I emphasize the word imagine as a historian's category, that is to apply for a PhD program in humanities in the United States, when such traditions were almost unknown in Kashmir, says a lot. I'm sure she will inspire us with her ideas today as well when she delivers her lecture. The lecture will extend to about 45 minutes to an hour to the max, followed by a discussion and a question and answer session. However, before we get started on the lecture, I request Professor Khaki to formally welcome our guests. And over to you, Professor Khaki.
Okay. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Idris Pandit. I am honored with the presence of a distinguished scholar, a native of Kashmir, Professor Idrisa Pandit, for having responded positively to our request to be with us and grace the occasion with his scholarly presence and the subsequent presentation that we are expecting. I am short of words, in fact, to acknowledge the presence of Professor Muhammad Ashraf Wani, formerly Dean, Academic Affairs, University of Kashmir, for being with us in spite of his busy academic schedule these days. I believe that the titles like Distinguished, Formidable, Stature, Literature, a scholar with vision, worldview, and value system, if at all it suits to somebody among the galaxy of scholars, it is Professor Muhammad Ashraf Wani. I am short of words to acknowledge his academic worth, academic merit, and the academic scholarship that he has lived with on the campus of university for a good period of time, and has illuminated young souls, young minds, and inspired a good population of students who have been studying in the university, admitted in different departments of the university in different capacities, as head department of history, as Dean Social Sciences, and lastly as Dean Academic Affairs of the University of Kashmir. I am highly honored with the presence of Professor Noor Muhammad Baba, who is formerly head department of political science and chairman Center for Shaikh-ul Aalam studies also. I am equally honored with the presence of Professor Nusrat Bazaz, head department of English, Dr. Sayyida Afshana, Dr. Ali Muhammad Rathar, all the distinguished faculty members and the research scholars of Center for Shaikh-ul Aalam studies. I welcome you to the first, interactive session that we had started, and I am sure that all of us will be benefited by this. Honorable Chief Guest, sir, and the resource person and the distinguished faculty members, organizing seminars, conferences, symposia, and other interactive sessions is in fact a permanent academic feature of the Center for Shaikh-ul Aalam Studies. Besides, I believe that because of many things that had happened over a period of time, especially after the COVID-19 and rest of the things that all of us know, that most of the academic activities, that the academic pursuits have been suspended globally as well, and that had badly affected the academic pursuits of Center for Shaikh-ul Aalam Studies. Otherwise, we usually organize such type of events, but because of many things that had happened, there has been a halt on all of it. So I'm sure that with the presence of our distinguished scholar, Professor Idrisa Pandit, whom we know as a faculty member at University of Kashmir, and with the presence of our distinguished Professor Muhammad Ashraf Wani and Professor Noor Ahmad Baba, that we have initiated this process, and this will continue as weekly presentations of Shaikh-ul Aalam studies in the days to come also, inshallah. We are grateful to Allah that things are now have turned to our favorable atmosphere, and by this that we may be in a position to invite scholars, distinguished scholars who had made an extraordinary contribution to different aspects of life with regard to Kashmir culture and civilization, with special reference to Hazrat Shaikh-ul Aalam rahmatullahi alayhi. And the beginning of this extension lecture is has been started with a formidable scholar presently with us, Professor Idrisa Pandit, with his presentation. And I am sure, inshallah, it will open doors for our inquiry and investigation and the participation of prominent scholars and the participants in the days to come for these interactions. There are many academic issues that have got currency in the global world, which include, as against other things, discussions on women, women empowerment, women emancipation, feminism, and so on and so forth. And sometimes we call it white feminism, red feminism, and black feminism. These are many terms and terminologies that are used with regard to women and women emancipation, women empowerment. Prominent academic institutions throughout the globe have been established to discuss the issues in an objective and lucid manner. Although many scholars have identified feminism as a phenomenon of 20th century and has become an advanced discourse of the contemporary academic activity, the roots of all these discussions fall back in the history of Islamic culture and Islamic legacy and the Islamic civilization, although not with the terminologies that are used in the contemporary world. Both scholars from East and West, Muslims and Orientalists, are engaged in such discussions around the globe. The issues of difference between Western scholarship and the Muslims, to my understanding, is believed that Western scholars believe that Islamic texts are, they don't encourage and promote, they promote, patriarchy and are devoid of the merit with regard to insofar as women justice is concerned. And the books like Bad Feminism and Second Sex are some of the examples of the Western scholars that have reflected such type of tendencies, such type of approach, such type of vision, and such type of, interpretation that has been narrated by these, scholars. While as the Muslim scholars believe that both Quran and Hadith has always maintained a balance between the sexes, many Muslim feminists, both male and female, believe in the historical legacy of Islam with special reference to inquiry and investigation. Medieval scholars with special reference believe to ensure objectivity in their research pursuits. They believe in three things, to my understanding: that the Quran is the book of Allah, that the religion is the God-oriented religion, and the universe is the creation of Allah. As such, no investigation whatsoever carried forward by such scholars did not remain a mere investigation, but became a sacred duty for all such scholars who have visualized Quranic worth, Quranic value, Quranic material, and the material of the text that are otherwise related to our, religion. So that's why such type of studies are altogether different to the studies who are devoid of such type of, approach and such type of tendencies. This may be true of some of a few scholars. For example, Quran and Women by Amina Wadood is one of the examples, maybe just like that. Feminism in Islam by Margaret Dabrin, one of the books that refer such type of tendencies. Believing Women in Islam by Asma Barlas. These are some of the Muslim scholars who have worked on the feminism and Muslims. And finally, Fatima Brindisi, Beyond the Veil. These are some of the books that have been authored by all these, with regard to the approaches, with regard to the the principles, with regard to the technologies, with regard to the tools and methods that are used in such type of studies. My own experience is altogether different. It will take me only 1 minute. With that, I will conclude. I will request our distinguished scholar for her presentation. There are, of course, discrimination. There is no doubt about it. Worldwide, whatever the region you will identify, you will see the discrimination of the sexes, male and female. Of course, these are. But with a distinctive perspective is beyond this. Distinctive is beyond comprehension. Sometimes how these differences had occurred. Excellence of work and scholarship, and the extensive travels and the sojourn of our distinguished guest speaker today speaks of the women emancipation and the women empowerment. Not to go by many other examples. This is a fundamental example with us. Professor Idrisa Pandit, a native of Kashmir, studied in Kashmir, and an opportunity to visit the prominent academic institutions throughout the globe. This, in fact, speaks of the Islamic approach to women and the justice that she had coined, justice, Qur'an, and feminism. So this is all about it. Fortunately, I have been a visitor to some of the countries, and mostly in Western countries, I have found most of the scholars, especially the women scholars who represent some Muslim world countries. Once they came, I have found myself, and this is in fact of the deliberations that we had with the scholars, of course the male one, that these scholars lived for a greater period of time in different parts of the world, not the Muslim world, the Western world. After 20 years, 30 years, they migrate back their own native places, and it seems almost difficult for them to accommodate themselves within a given social spectrum. So that's the reason that they had coined some terms. They had encouraged these terms rather so as to ensure for themselves a feasible atmosphere where they can live with honor and dignity. These terms have otherwise, to my understanding, there is no such term the feminism that we believe in or the discrimination itself. If at all we talk about the discrimination, the only thing that comes to my mind is that it is in fact the poverty that leads to a discrimination between male and female, whether it is urban, whether it is rural. In both ways, it is always poverty that reduces the family member, head of the family member, to be more inclined to the male ones as against the female ones. Otherwise, if it is not poverty, it will be all without any discrimination. And this is what our Quran has taught us. This is what the Prophet Muhammad has taught us. With these words, I am highly grateful, obliged to one and all, to initially the distinguished scholar, Professor Idrisa Pandit, and fortunately we have with us Dean School of Social Sciences, Central University of Kashmir, Professor Hamid Naseem Sahab. I welcome you again, sir, and all the scholars. So with these words, I welcome you all, and I request formally our distinguished speaker on the occasion to share his valuable insights with the audience. Professor Idrisa Pandit.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you so much for your generosity, hospitality, and for your kind welcome, Professor Kaki and Professor Kant, for hunting me down and making me come here. I'm honored to be in the presence of some of the greatest teachers of this university, Professor Vani and Professor Baba. Thank you so much for being here. And to my colleagues that are all here, and some former students to Madrasa Chawarpur. Anyways, salams to all of you. And ये जो शुगो मुझोरे अंग्रेजी में क्या करमो था? Anyways, नाज़ में जो मुशद, इंशाल्लाह करो कशर पढ़ी का. Anyways. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm limited for time, so I won't take too much of your time, but I'm really again humbled and privileged to be back at my alma mater. And as you've already heard, I am a product of this university, and I'm really grateful for everything that I learned from my distinguished teachers, some of whom I was trying to find out more about from some of the colleagues, Nusrat ji and Kaki Saab, and so really grateful for having been part of this system. I briefly also was part of the faculty system here, so wo in mein yaad kiye, that's a whole different story. So anyways, I'm very grateful for my Merck former students and colleagues for their presence here, so welcome all of you. I'm really truly heartened to learn about this Shaikh-ul Aalam Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. It's about time. I must say, as a lone interdisciplinary studies scholar, it's been a long journey, and 3 decades later to see that this university is moving towards recognizing the importance of humanities is indeed gratifying for me. And I'll tell you a little bit about my journey in the humanities in a moment. But what I really firmly believe, based on where most of the humanities scholarship is headed, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, it's really important at this juncture for Kashmir University to take this step, as we are in the process universally of trying to undo what I call, and other scholars have, of course, before me, called epistemic racism. And I think that is so inherent in how we look at scholarship. So those of you who may not be familiar with the term epistemic racism, to summarize, that 80% of the world's scholarship that we study, that we research, that we tend to value, comes from the part of the world which constitutes less than 20%. So in other words, everything that is produced in the so-called global south is reduced to almost nothing. So when I mention in my classes philosophers like Iqbal and others, people look at me with great wonder. So we have failed miserably in promoting scholarship that is not colonized. So there's this big trend in the Western universities, including my own institution, the idea of decolonizing knowledge. And I think we are now embarking on a whole new project of colonization right here. So I think decolonization takes on a whole new meaning for us here in Kashmir, and I want you to hold that thought for a moment. As far as democratizing education, and particularly democratizing education in the humanities, again, I think this center is going to do wonders. Hopefully, inshallah, you will move in the right direction. Incidentally, my own work, almost all of my pre-doctoral work and my doctoral work and postdoctoral work had to do with humanities and humanities research. My focus has always been on communication and the humanities. So again, that's a whole other story. It was very interesting that I found out from Idrisa that this center is called the Shaikh-ul Aalam Center. Many, many years ago, when I was a teenager, I've been going through my home archives. I came across about 5 sheets of paper, and I was shocked that I used to write kosher. So in case somebody thinks I have forgotten kosher. And I had participated in a debate. It was titled, Shaikh-ul Aalam Osa Rish Ke Nasher. Tahmazos, Nazki Sab, Rahi Sab, and I forget, a couple of other judges, but it's distinct memory in my mind. I was a teenager, and it was a debate. I won't tell you which side of the debate I fell on, but I'm sure you can guess. But it was really refreshing for me to look through my own notes. Somebody asked me, and I asked myself, I used the big word irfan in there. I don't think I knew what that meant, but that's a different story. Why am I here standing in front of you? And it's important whenever I teach, whenever I speak to an audience, it's important for me to identify my own positionality, and I think you have the right to know. You've already heard that I'm a Kashmiri, you've already heard that I am a product of this university, but what brings me to this topic? So for a number of years, my career has taken interesting trajectories, but for a number of years, partly because of my encounter with the West and my own, shall we say, reclamation of my own faith. I have certainly been invested in issues that have to do with Islam and Islam in the West in particular, but Islam and women and more so, in that realm of gender justice. But not just merely as a theoretician, but more getting my hands really dirty. So I have for 3 decades been working in a number of social justice issues that have to do with women. And the reason I chose to speak about this topic, there are several, but I just finished last month teaching a graduate course on the Qur'an in translation. And one of the segments of the course that always tends to elicit a great deal of feedback and response is the segment on gender. That particular course is meant for graduate students, either PhD students or returning counselors and psychotherapists, and sometimes academics who take, and there were a few in my class this time, that are really interested in learning more about the Quranic perspective on a number of things, but gender being one of them. I also teach courses specifically on Muslim women, and again, they are some of the most vibrant courses that I do teach. So in the backdrop of the discussion in my latest class and happenings around the world, and by happenings around the world, I don't mean the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. I mean for our own universal consciousness of what is happening around the globe and how that impacts the lives of Muslims in general, but Muslim women in particular. I have truly been reflecting a great deal on this topic of gender justice and the Quran, and the necessity for us to do a bit of self-reflection. And also, because I'm in Kashmir and have been for many months, I think that that process of self-reflection is as warranted here in our community as it is elsewhere. So about a week ago, I don't know why, but I wrote this dedication, and I called it Nisa al-Qur'an. So here's how it goes. O women of the Qur'an, O you who have caused revelation, you've taught me devotion, truthfulness, and scholarship of Maryam, patience and constancy of Aisha, humility and power of Bilqis, chastity, modesty, and purity of mothers of believers, standing up for the truth of Asiya, pain and grief of the mother of Musa, submission and motherhood of Hajar, comforting with love of Khadija, haya in speaking your mind of the sisters of Madian, questioning injustice of Khawla, and above all, independence of self of Hawa. O women of the Quran, you remind me to ask myself, what have your hands sent forth? That verse from the Quran repeatedly occurs throughout the Quran, where we are asked, what have our hands sent forth? That's a question for me to ponder as an individual Muslim, as an individual Muslim woman. And then came Professor Kant's phone call, and I thought, you know what, I'm already on this journey, I might as well embark further on this theme and explore it a bit. So first, I will examine and investigate these stories and lessons they bear for us as humanity, and not just for women. I just want to make that very clear. I honestly, purposely, and deliberately was not going to use the word feminism on this campus, because as Professor Rafiabadi will testify, that causes a lot of discomfort. So my brother did it, so I'm not at fault.
Okay. No, I didn't.
That's okay, I'm just teasing you. Second, I want to ask how these lessons might help us as a community to reclaim the ongoing struggle of Quranic justice in general and gender justice in particular. I've also wondered, and I've seriously wondered, what would happen if our ulama, many of whom are sitting in this room, and our imams who hold the attention of the masses on Fridays and other days started using these stories and examples to truly illustrate how Islam emerged to end injustice and to uphold the core Quranic principle of standing up for justice, as Allah exhorts us in Surah An-Nisa to be steadfast maintainers of justice and witnesses for God, even if it is against one's own self. The khutbahs that I've often heard in the West, we go to masajids. Oh, I know that that's not the norm here. But the khutbahs I've often heard about Muslim women, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, are often flowery, invoking the liberation of women way before the West recognized issues of women's liberation and freedom or place of a mother in our lives. While these utopian reminders are good in their own right, what is forgotten in these speeches often is a reflection on the reality of lives of Muslim women. What we forget in these speeches is how women are being treated in their homes and in the society in general, be they mothers, wives, or daughters. There seems to be a real preoccupation, though, with women as a source of temptation. You've all heard that. All women are fitna. Though, to the point of outlandish attributions that all natural disasters are now caused by women, particularly their behavior and their dress. So today, I want us to shift our thinking a little bit and try and examine a few Quranic stories a little differently. Let us ask ourselves, how should we use these stories to help us steady our feet in our quest for justice? Let me begin with the beginning, the story of creation. I want us to take a moment and think carefully about the Quranic Hawa, not the Hawa that resembles the biblical Hawa, which many popular Quranic interpretations influenced by Israeliyat make her out to be. Hawa, the woman who has her own personhood, the one who shares the original nafs of human creation in equal partnership, and her agency. This Hawa, neither the temptress nor the source of fitna. This woman, along with her husband, understands individual responsibility as well as accountability. The importance of actively seeking divine forgiveness and starting life on a clean state. The Quranic Hawa is not the evil temptress who suffers pangs of childbirth for the rest of human existence, nor a source of crookedness or fragile because of the crooked rib as the source of her being. As if the rib story wasn't enough, the crookedness had to be further inserted to justify her inadequacy. I want us to remember Hawa as a woman with God-given independence of self, not as a slave over whom a man has been appointed as a governor. That too, as some of you may know, is a biblical concept, which is why the Bible, unlike Islam or unlike the Quran, requires women to cover their hair in Christianity in obedience of their husbands, which is generally what is attributed to Muslim women, which is an absolute falsehood. Once again, just hold that thought, as often we see that transposed to Islam when some men justify their power over women and control of their bodies and dress. So today, I want to reclaim the Quranic Hawa to help us establish gender equity and justice. Moving on to Hajar. Hajar, the mother of Islamic civilization. The woman who teaches us the true meaning of submission to the will of Allah as she accepts her fate of being left alone in the midst of the desert with an infant. Imagine the pain of a mother who in desperation tries to save her child's life, seeks sustenance to keep her baby alive. No one but God responds to her call. And she uses her skill as a tradeswoman to establish the valley of Becca, which we know today as Mecca, by trading water with the moving caravans. How many of us ponder upon the sacrifice of Hajar and her role in the establishment of Islam? Think about it for a moment. The centrality of her presence in the foundation of our faith traditions, especially as we perform the rituals of Umrah and Hajj, which revolve around the struggle of this lone mother. The most we reference Hajar is as the obedient spouse of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Hajar is a figure whose biblical representation may help us. We often tend to invoke the Bible when it comes to Hawa, but we do not look at the biblical invocation when it comes to Hajar. Hajar is a figure whose biblical representation may help us further our appreciation of her as the mother of Ismail. The woman to whom God speaks in the Bible and comforts directly as he finds her struggling. She proclaims, and I quote, "You are the God who sees me." And she says, "I have now seen the one who sees me." The biblical reference is something that we never invoke, unlike the stories that perpetrate misogyny. So today, I wish to reclaim the Quranic Hajar, who exhibits patience, wisdom, abundance of iman, and above all, resilience and the art of business establishment in a barren land. One other issue that is always hotly debated in our communities is the incapacity of women as governors, as rulers and administrators, even as judges. We're quick to justify this incapacity and loudly proclaim the deficiency of women by citing weak ahadith to justify our position. It's indeed ironic that there have been successful more than a dozen Muslim women heads of state, while the United States is still struggling to find its first one. But before we take pride in that accomplishment, let us examine the reality of discourse prevalent in our communities about female leadership. To answer that, the Quranic example of the Queen of Saba is sufficient to put an end to the energy expended on looking for excuses to deny female leadership. Qur'an's Queen of Saba demonstrates the art of peaceful diplomacy with beauty and grace, an acknowledgement in the Qur'an made even by her own male advisors. She leads her community in a prudent, gentle, and peaceful manner with consultation at the heart of her decision-making, something which we may call democracy in the true sense of the term. Her humility and acceptance of the right path through active engagement is an example that could serve many a leader of today's world, as well as those who have power, yet abuse it to tame and control women whom they see as dangerous and misguided. Had Allah wanted us to derive that lesson that women are unfit to rule and hold leadership positions, perhaps the story of Saba would be different. So I wish to reclaim the Quranic Queen of Sheba or Saba and honor her for her humility, her wisdom, her diplomacy, and her art of statecraft. We live at a time when we hold women responsible for all evils in this world. Slander abounds, and we don't think twice about our actions. Our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, in whose honor Allah revealed a response to silence the slanderers and transgressors, is the best reminder about seriousness of slander, rumor mongering, and leveling false accusations. Aisha, our mother, invoking the patience of Yaqub alayhi salam, remained constant and patient while the world around her was literally crumbling. Our mother caused a revelation to occur, teaching us the important lesson of not relying on unsubstantiated accusations, always to think well of others, and seriousness of accusations of sexual misconduct and requirement of evidence and eyewitnesses. Empty and vain talk is condemned in the Qur'an, and the chastity and honor of women is protected. The fact that the Qur'an upholds a woman's testimony as final in a serious allegation of sexual misconduct flies in the face of those that purport the inferiority of women's judgment in something as simple as a financial transaction, which is a topic for a whole different time. The Qur'an exhorts us and warns us in the story of Aisha radiallahu anha to never ever indulge in false accusations as believers and to reject the footsteps of Satan. So today, I wish to reclaim the Quranic Aisha and the divine revelation that upholds and protects the honor of women. The voice of a woman in many Muslim cultures and spaces is considered a source of corruption. And often we see campaigns to silence women, especially if they ask questions that are often considered dangerous. So, I wish to recall the story of Khawla in the Qur'an, a woman who dared to question the injustice of the evil practice of zihar, and hence became a cause of revelation. Allah directly answers her call, causing an end to a Jahiliyyah practice. In all spaces where Muslim women are struggling to raise their voice, especially to end unjust societal and cultural practices, doubting, and worse yet, silencing is often the standard response. When oppression persists in our communities, be it in the form of domestic violence or any other form of family violence or sexual violence and excess, it is quite extraordinary that the only way people respond to it is by silencing the very same women who want to raise these special or very serious issues. So today I will reclaim Khawla of the Quran to help guide our struggle against all social evils and injustices, often even perpetrated by hijacking Islam. Let us end the silencing of those that dare to question and build an inner capacity to create a society that welcomes and trusts the voices of women. One of the things that I've often noticed is how men hesitate to reach out and help women. Sometimes they even turn aside when they clearly know that a woman may be in need of help. And all of this is apparently done in the name of modesty and maintaining propriety of contact. As an aside, to illustrate how ridiculous this becomes, sometimes Muslim men in my classes refuse to acknowledge Muslim women who are their classmates. Yet, they have absolutely no qualms about mingling with non-Muslim women, often even walking hand in hand on campus and making friends with them. I've thought about this. So here in this story, where Prophet Musa alayhi salam extends a helping hand to two sisters, while none of the men care to even allow them access to the water well, what does it demonstrate for us? Indeed, chivalry on his part, and humility and gratitude on part of the sisters. Yet, often when I encounter interpretations, and I encourage you to look at some of the Quranic interpretations of this story, instead of commenting on the clear bad manners and absolute lack of care and courtesy on part of these men, the story turns into preservation of modesty of women who did not push or shove because there were men around. Prophet Musa alayhi salam in this story sends a very clear message of the right etiquette in a situation such as this one. And the two sisters in return don't stay silent. Impressed by his behavior, report their appreciation to their father and commend him as a strong and caring person, leading to a marriage proposal for one of the daughters. Surely there are lessons here as well. Dare I say, of mutual attraction perhaps, based on husn al-akhlaq of the sister and Prophet Musa, as well as emphasis on the strength of character of Musa alayhi salam. Let us pause for a minute and ask, How often do we take into consideration a woman's opinion in marriage? Moreover, how often do we prize strength of character and behavior of a man over money and position? Therefore, I wish to reclaim the sisters of Madian for the strength of character and moreover, for speaking their mind. Along the same lines, let's examine the inner beauty and strength of character of the first Muslim, Khadija radiallahu anha. Here's our mother, a noble merchant who sustained Islam from its beginning, and I emphasize that, who sustained Islam from its beginning. She was her husband's kewam. Khadija radiallahu anha applauded the character and honesty of our beloved Prophet ﷺ and did not shy away from extending a proposal to a man 15 years younger than her. How often do we ponder upon the role our dear mother played in establishing and sustaining our faith? Moreover, let us examine this woman of strength and wisdom who drove away the doubt from our dear Prophet ﷺ. She drove away the doubt from his mind by finding practical solutions to his fear. She enveloped our beloved Prophet ﷺ with love and care. The love and faith she exhibited in her spouse demonstrates to us the true meaning of spouses being a cover for each other and a source of muwadda, which is difficult to translate. Experts in Arabic can translate that for us. There's no real word. The English word love really falls very short of that. Despite the consequences, she stood by her husband like a rock in the most difficult of circumstances, unwavering in her support of his mission. We owe it to this woman that we are Muslims today, just as we owe it to Hajar before her. So I do wish to reclaim the Khadija of the Qur'an, the loving nurturer and sustainer of our beloved Prophet ﷺ and our faith. Two other stories that highlight the pain and patience of a mother, as well as the power of motherhood that transforms a person in the household of a tyrant into an ardent believer who seeks her house next to the house of Allah. For the mother of Musa alayhi salam to have ultimate faith in the promise of Allah and to let go of her infant child is an epitome of trust in Allah, who reunited the mother with her child in a mysterious way, while that child becomes an instrument of ending suffering for all other mothers and their sons. Is there a lesson more profound to truly understand the meaning of Hasbi Allah? Once again, we have a woman in the Quran to whom Allah reveals a promise. I wish to reclaim the mother of Musa for teaching us the ultimate meaning of sacrifice and having faith and trusting our affairs to God alone. The Quran calls Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, an example for believers, not example for women. Asiya, one of the best women in Islam, a righteous woman fully exerting her independence and agency in declaring full faith in Allah, despite being the wife of a tyrant. As a woman who was used to living in palaces on this earth, what is her supplication? She entreats Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asks for a house in the garden and delivery from her husband and his evil deeds, and from the evil deeds of all wrongdoing people. So I reclaim Asiya as an example for all humankind, for her unwavering love of Allah, and as a person who carves her spiritual identity amongst the worst of persecution and oppression, seeking nothing but nearness to Allah. I reclaim Asiya as a guide for all those who wish to stand up for truth despite all the hardship that may be involved in such an endeavor. After Asiya, the Quran names Mary as an example, again, not for women, for humanity. The one who preserved her chastity and among the devoutly obedient. The one who carried God's spirit as an example. I want to end with the story of Maryam, because she is indeed the best of women as promised to us in the Qur'an until the end of time. Given that we are at a university, an aspect of her life which we do not emphasize enough or often don't even remember is associated with teaching and learning. When Mother of Maryam alayhi salam dedicates the child in her womb to the service of Allah, she prays for a son. What she gets is a girl. Think for a moment. What better divine response to those who see women as incapable of carrying out the tradition of learning and scholarship, and to those who still conform to the Jahiliyyah tradition of considering girls as a burden. Mary's scholarship, her absolute obedience, her grace, yet also her vulnerability as a woman suffering through childbirth and fearful of accusations of unchastity, make her a very unique and special teacher for all of us. So I reclaim Mary today as our guide, our teacher, and the one that Allah has elevated forever. So now you must be all wondering, what is my intention in invoking these women of the Quran today? It's merely to remind myself and all of us that in the world where misogyny and patriarchy has taken hold, and where women, Muslim women particularly, are being subjected to injustice, both within their communities and at the hands of imperialist forces and militaristic regimes, the least we can do is to turn to these lessons of justice from the Quran. If we are to fight injustice in this world, it will take all of us, men and women, to use these examples as universal examples and not merely as lessons to rebuke, reprimand, and control women or exercise power over them. It is time to end the distortion of the lessons and morals of these stories and truly embrace the Quranic lesson of ending oppression and injustice, whether it exists in our communities or is a product of gendered Islamophobia or anti-Muslim racism. We cannot progress without self-reflection and liberating our stories from parochial and distorted interpretations that stifle our thinking and darken our world. And blaming others is just another way of deflecting our responsibility. If we do not craft this discourse ourselves, external forces will craft it for us. And that project has been in the making for a very long time. And just in case you're going to shift this responsibility to women like myself, this is not going to happen. Women alone cannot do it. The project of gender equity and gender justice is a common project for all those who wish to see an end to oppression. We have the power to create change and to cultivate solidarities across genders and shades of religiosity. We need to get beyond, that person is less of a Muslim than I am. That person only prays one time or never prays. We need to form solidarities that move beyond those generalizations and assumptions. I'm asking you, we have the power to create change and to cultivate solidarities across genders and shades of religiosity. We also have the power to undo the structures of oppression, because without addressing the structures, you cannot pay lip service to these things. Until and unless we dismantle the structures that enable injustice, change will not be permanent. I'm sure when I step out of this room, many men in this room and those listening will be upset and say, that is not me or my family. I treat my wife, my daughter, my mother just as Islam requires me to. What Idrisa is talking about does not apply to me. I agree, that may well be the case. What I'm asking you, men and women, as women, equally also be perpetrators of injustice. I want to make sure that I admit that. Hashay noshen divan isa. So hash deos ek zaman nosh. So I want to make sure that you know that I understand that. As women can equally be perpetrators of injustice against other women and sometimes even against men. Because I've done domestic violence work for 3 decades, I have seen that as well. This is not the time for self-righteousness. We need to create solidarities and coalitions, not coalitions of convenience, but coalitions of conscience. Sometimes coalitions fail, sometimes projects fail, but it's good for us to fail together as men and women than to fail alone. It does not matter whether you individually oppose patriarchy and misogyny. It is time for a coalition of conscience to change the contours of gender injustice by forming long-lasting coalition of men and women with one clear purpose. And that purpose is ending injustice and oppression in all its forms. I am absolutely not advocating for men to take the lead. My hope is men will listen to women, make space for them and their lived experience. And don't ever make that assumption. Don't ever think that you know it all unless you have walked in my shoes. So when somebody gives a khutbah and says all these wonderful things about women or decries women, they don't know women. So let women speak. Make space for them, their lived experiences, because hijacking women's experiences does not help anyone. We do have our agency and can speak for ourselves. Having said that, I'm also practical. I know that there are spaces in our culture and societies that are absolutely inaccessible to women. The masajids and other gatherings that are predominantly male and hold a lot of power, which then transfers to those who participate in those gatherings. So changing those structures of power and creating them into just spaces falls on the shoulders of you, my dear brothers. If we fail in this project, know that there are many others waiting to direct this project to drive their colonial, imperialist, secular colonial agenda that will forever keep Muslim women in the space of victims and Muslim men as aggressors and victimizers. The choice is ours, whether we all become advocates of justice, reclaim the Qur'an, or we allow others to define feminism for us. I thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Idrisa Pandit, for a wonderful discussion, for the wonderful discourse, and the theme of contemporary significance that she has identified to deliberate upon and discuss with the audience. I'm sure there must be many things in your mind with regard to the presentation, observations, questions, whatsoever, and I'm sure you will get a chance for that. And before that, invite the questions and the observations by the audience, by the scholars, distinguished scholars here. The moral duty to welcome our distinguished professors who have been a bit late, Dr. Nasir Sahib, Dr. Sabiha Mufti, and we have online, scholars, almost 29 scholars who are online with us presently, with special reference to, I welcome Professor G.M. Athar from Jamia Islamia, Professor Zinat Asadi from Mumbai, Professor Farhat Nasreen from Jamia Islamia, and other distinguished participants who are with us online at this moment. So this Professor Bashir Bashir, the formerly Chairman Center for Shaikh-ul Aalam Studies, and I welcome you, sir, all of you who are online joining the program, and other participants who are again online. So I'm highly grateful to all of you that you have found time to be with us to listen to a wonderful discourse that had been made by our distinguished scholar from Kashmir, Professor Idrisa Pandit. So this is the, in fact, summary of the exemplary character of Quranic women who lived in different historical periods of times and that had promoted justice and had negated, what we usually call patriarchy. So I believe that the findings derived thereof will be more compatible to a society, whether rural or urban, and never talk of the patriarchy whatsoever, both male and female. It will be all, detrimental to our future with regard to the presentation that had been made. So before I formally request our former Dean Academic Affairs, Professor Mohammad Ashrafani, to make her presidential remarks, I will request to the distinguished audience, the offline as well as the online, to have your observations, questions, whatsoever that's in your mind with regard to the presentation. So to begin with, I will request the Dean School of Social Sciences, Central University of Kashmir, Professor Hamid Nasim Saab, to make his observation, maybe a question as well. I'm sorry, I welcome Professor Cole Saab. So kind of you, sir, for being with us. So kind of you, sir. God bless you. Thank you very much. As you like, sir. Then if you come here, it will take a lot of time. Okay, you want something more?
No,
okay, now you will. Okay, yeah. The way you like, sir. The way you
Might be.
ये शायद रशीद साहब हाँ रशीद साहब के सर के ऊपर से जा रहा है. So thank you very much, madam. It was really a very good discourse, and I am happy that I have been just saying this for a long time, as a man, not as a woman. Thank you, thank God. But you are right. So why we are allowing others to interpret our things for us? As you said, it will be now just taken by the people, colonizers, and they will colonize this topic as well. I had a good interaction with the Professor Amna Wadud at Indonesia and in Kashmir also. So she was also saying this, that I am not saying that we should invoke feminism. We should invoke Quran and Islamic injections. And maybe interpretation is different, no problem in that, as you mentioned about Rib or Zaraba. So different meaning, and I was very much astonished to see that Professor Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, the rector of Islamic University Malaysia, he has said the same thing. He says Zaraba does not mean to beat women. Zaraba means to just to go away for some time from. Just to give some examples like that. So in this way, basically we need to reinterpret Quran, and you are right, as Zinat Kausar has rightly said. There are three interpretations of Quran about women. One is modernist, where we say feminist and woman is more than man, and then there is traditional, as you mentioned about we can't allow women to go to masjid, they can't talk much, they can't give any session, they can't give advice. So this is happening. But Quranic approach is totally different. I was teaching here Quran and women. I was just quoting from the text verses of the Quran and ahadith of the Prophet. For example, I was astonished to see Prophet says the best women of Arab are the Quraysh women who are riding camel, and we don't allow women to even drive car. So who is at fault? Prophet says that Khairul Nisa Quraysh, Yarkibn al-Ibl. But Muslims don't allow women to drive car. It is the tribal approach. It has nothing to do with Islam. So we need to reclaim that position which has been given. And so Yusuf, Surah Yusuf, you would have mentioned that the feelings and the temptations of a woman have been mentioned in Quran, a verbatim. So Quran gives that much importance to women discourse even. And then you mentioned about Sabah and others. So we need to talk it from that angle rather than taking their discourse. In USA I had said this. I said it, although Cole Saab is here, he was the director of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Bombay, great scholar. So I can say that if really the women are given the rights which have been given to them by Quran, I don't think so any woman will feel ashamed to be Muslim. But this time women feel that we need to go outside the Islamic pale of Islam if we want to get rights. And I will end on this. I said Quran had given women all the rights, but Muslims have snatched all. And then I say about feminism, as Khaki Sahib has mentioned that. So feminism gives women rights, but after snatching her femininity. So they give rights, but they do keep woman. They make her something more than man. And then she does not get rights as woman. She may get rights as something else, but not as woman. To give women rights as women is important. That has been given by Quran, as you mentioned. Thank you very much.
So I have forgotten one name. Our distinguished. What is the
Yes, you would probably like to ask your question.
Professor Farhad Nasreen.
I know, Professor Farhad Nasreen from.
Hi,
Please do that. But,
can I speak?
Sure.
I hope I'm audible.
Professor Rafiabadi, I just thank you. I didn't use the word feminism, but I am a, but I have to make it clear for matters of transparency. I'm a feminazi. I'm not just a feminist, I'm a feminazi. So it depends on how you define feminism. And I think that's extremely important for me to mention that, because I think we tend to demonize feminism. We have a whole field of scholarship called Islamic Feminism, which I teach. So my feminism is rooted in the revelation, purely in the revelation, not even in a hadith. Because if I can't claim my feminism, which is rooted in gender justice from the revelation itself, then I would be a hypocrite. So I don't shy away from using that label, but I think it's time people educate themselves about what feminism, and there are multiple feminisms. So I think we should be very clear about that. Thank you.
Okay.
They said Professor Farhad Nasreen would like to ask a question. Professor Farhad Nasreen, please go ahead. If you can hear us.
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you. I hope I'm audible.
No problem.
Am I audible?
You're just about,
Yes.
perhaps.
A bit louder.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can.
Okay, is it better now?
Slightly louder if you can.
Okay,
Sorry,
am I audible now?
All right.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi, Professor Idrisa. This was one of the most beautiful discourses that I've ever heard. It was really nice, and I really enjoyed every bit of what you spoke with so much of passion and so much of energy and so much of dedication and enthusiasm. Thank you so much for that. Ma'am, I have one question. Like you said, that the mosques are spaces of power. And and you find that often the khutbah which is being done in the mosque, you find that the khutbah is related to the conduct of the women instead of the conduct of men who are actually attending the khutbah. How do you think that we can intervene in this, and tell people that the khutbah has to be about the conduct of men, because the large audience there is men, but they give a discourse about women, how they should dress up, how they should, conduct themselves, and so on and so forth. How do you think we can reclaim those spaces in the mosques while the khutbah is being done? Do you think we can intervene there?
Thank you so much, Professor Farhad. Very kind and generous of you to make those remarks. As probably you are already familiar, there's a whole range of scholarship on female leadership, and Klambach and Masuda Bano have an excellent compilation of articles in the book on female leadership. I would direct your attention to that as well. It is extremely important to create alternative spaces. And there are women that have already done that. But I also take your point very well. We cannot, at least I don't. I am not all for separating men and women, although many women out of frustration are creating their own spaces of prayer where women are in prayer leadership. But I think we really do need to go back and fix things structurally. And that's where I agree with you, is that you cannot speak about women's lived experience as the leader of a congregation if you really don't allow that space to a woman. Now, clearly, we know that our social spaces and our religious spaces have their limitations. So I think we then, as men, I think it will have to be men, not women, because women have no access to those khatibs. The men, those who can understand an anti-oppressive, approach to understanding issues of gender justice would have to push that. If you hear an imam quoting weak hadith, if you hear an imam giving a khutbah that denigrates women and promotes misogyny, patriarchy, and injustice, including, Professor Hamid Naseem has left. Of course, this was not a lecture about Quran and the feminine by examining the Quranic verses, which is a lecture I do love to give, where I completely dismantle this myth about beating women. Just even saying that sends shivers through me, that anybody would think that Islam would sanction violence against women. I mean, I must say this because I think it will be incomplete if I don't. Think about the context in which supposedly the Quran recommends beating women. It's the exact same context for men also. So in the case of men, the Quran's prescription is walk away from the women. Do you think that same creator would reverse that and in the case of women say, no, beat them first? And which idiotic woman would want to stay in a relationship after having gone through 4 different stages and ultimately someone is going to pick up a little blade of grass and beat the woman and then all's going to be fine? Just think about it logically. So anyways, I'm sorry I had to interject that because this gets taken out of context. So when you hear about perpetrating injustice against women in their homes, in their societies, speak up. We women are not in those masajids. It's you men who are. Educate yourselves first, and then, speak up and make sure that next time it doesn't happen. Because remember, if there are 500 men in that congregation, at least 5 may take that wrong message and go and implement it in their homes and start disciplining all the women folk around them. So this is a serious issue. And given the rate of domestic violence, not just here in Kashmir, I'm talking about rate of domestic violence in Muslim communities in general, in the world in general, we must take this issue up. I'm sorry, Professor Farhat, if I didn't answer all your question, but I got distracted. So if I didn't do justice, let me know.
Ma'am, I'm totally floored. I mean, this is after ages that I've heard such a fantastic talk. I'm so impressed. May God bless you. I'm really impressed and moved, and this is just beautiful, and may Allah bless you. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor, can you hear me? Hello? Please go ahead. Audio call.
Maybe somebody else. Among the audience, somebody.
Yeah, somebody from the audience like asking.
Hello.
Any questions? Ask you whether I have seen and experienced many people very well educated in Islamic studies, very well practitioners of Islam, teachers of Islam. They commit domestic violence. I have seen personally. So I think the social cultural background, the traditions of the society, how to what extent are these responsibilities which is domestic violence? I think you can consider that.
Yeah. I mean, so because I do domestic violence work, so I have to give you this example. When we talk about domestic violence, it absolutely does not matter how highly educated a person is. It does not matter how much religious education they have or worldly secular education they have. I have seen professors, doctors, engineers, imams, multiple imams who have been the worst violators. Okay, so I personally refuse to pray behind those imams because I know the inside story, but not everybody does. I mean, this is confidential work, so you can't go out. Although, honestly, there are times where I would like to go out in public and say, don't, you know, but this is unfortunate. But to answer your question, there was a domestic violence case where a man put a knife to the neck of his wife. And obviously, it doesn't just happen suddenly. It had been going on. Family violence was part of that family. And that one time, one of the daughters decided to pick up the phone and call the police. And so the man ended up in jail. In this particular case, the man was Egyptian. When the court hearings took place, the lawyer who was defending this man invoked a culture of violence as part of Islam. Think about it.
Violence.
That we have to grant this man pardon because he's a Muslim. Secondly, he comes from an Egyptian culture where this is rampant. So I'm just giving you this example as one instance, but I've seen this repeatedly, where people use the excuse of culture and society. Ish mein unta hi jawab. Agar kais mardas aas na frustration amad, so kya is pannis basas maar devan. You know, that's the easiest place to go because we make excuses. Emisas daftaras mas frustration amas. Yos tang goman. So these have emis basas maria yemse tang korrek. Emsanan kya kor? Right? So I think when we make excuses for men and women do this, I'm saying we are at fault. I have also, this is another thing that you men can do here. Allah Ta'ala farmawan Quran Sharif ismaz, Inna Allahumma sabrin. Yes. It's the worst that is most abused in the family violence context. I'm sorry if someone doesn't understand Kashmiri, so I'll switch to English. Oh, okay. Imam Sabanish, because, you know, as a woman, I still don't hold that same authority. The bunch Imam Sab kar at first. Imam Sabanish yelivadan chana se zanan, so shtemiz dapan, sabr kar. And I'm not talking about kosher imam because I don't deal with kosher imam. I'm talking about imams in the West who are highly educated, but they're still imported imams, and I'll explain that distinction to anyone who doesn't understand that. Timshidam is the man zakar sabr zakas gar. Beshidam asal pahan sun renji. Betha panun khayal, right? Think about it. The multiplication of family violence and what that does to that family. Patience is repeatedly mentioned in the Quran, but injustice and standing up for injustice is mentioned even more. So when we give advice to somebody who is undergoing any form of violence, but particularly family violence and domestic violence, please emphasize justice over sabr. Sabr is abused to such an extent that we have made a mockery of the Quran.
We have online one, please. Professor Bashir, or we audible to you, sir?
Hello.
Professor Bashir sir.
Assalamualaikum.
You want to ask something, sir? आप कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं सर?
सलाम.
Audio problem.
मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
Can you type your question? मैंने अच्छा ऐसे का फयाज सब ये करे ठीक है और एक्चुअली नहीं हूं मैं बताइए कि
प्रोफेसर जे मथर प्रोफेसर
हुजूर मैं छुन की वालन वो बॉस
Oh,
Hello.
okay, okay.
Professor Jian Khaji, I'll just hear.
All right, sir.
Khaji
I
sir.
don't want to pose any question this time.
Hello. Khaji sir. Hello.
We speak about simple issues. The topic is, I said, I generally talk to them. I said, how does your husband treat you? She said, Nas marchu amtui. This is the word. Tietahan has cha amtui. Tietahan has cha amtui. There are so many experiences, and when I begin my day, I leave my home, reciting the durood, and by the time I reach my office, I am so much put off with these experiences. But I see a behavioral dichotomy. I'm myself perplexed. You see, I have, being from a middle class background, but rooted in so many cases that I look around. For instance, there are women, as ma'am said, Dr. Idrisa has been my teacher and very, he's my mentor also. So we see women sabr, यह जो पकाने चलाने, then it has a multiplier effect. It goes on, and it's part of the routine. Next, we say, okay, women who are economically not, independent, they have no other choice but to stay on because the tag of the divorce or the tag of a separation. There's no social energy, there's no social support, there's no family support for such things. On the other side, we see those women who get up and raise their voice against it. Then we see the social institutions crumbling. Family crumbles, marriage crumbles. So, I mean, this is such a cynical situation in which you are perplexed what to do. Is now the crumbling of the family, then the children are in a disastrous situation? Is it better to have sabr? Is it better to continue with it? And the worst part is that I'm seeing in the contemporary, I'm a researcher who is associated with the Women's Commission and the cases that come there. So I am a silent observer, generally sitting in they have weekly or monthly, solution of cases. They have some women or who give counseling and all. And generally what we see is women who are doctors. I have the example of a doctor whose husband was a teacher in the medical college, who used to put her head inside the commode ke andar uska sar wo dalta tha, upar se flush karta tha. And she was a girl from Bangalore. And then the lady who was the head chief consultant, this happened about 7-8 years back, she told this man, the girl was from Bangalore, जब तुम्हें इस लड़की से प्यार हो गया तब तुम्हें क्यों नहीं ख्याल था कि तुम इसकी इज्जत करोगे? अब जब ये तुम्हारे घर में रहने आई है, फॉर माइनर थिंग्स, she was adjusting in the culture. So पोर बारामूला में कहीं शादी हुई थी, तो फिर उसके बाद इसके बाप ने 35 लाख रुपए देके उस डॉक्टर को डोनेशन देके MD करवाया था. उसके बाद जब वो यहाँ आए, ये छोटे मसले तो अलग हैं, that the girl was going in a bus, she took a loan for the car, he used to travel in the car. Ultimately the destiny ऐसी हुई कि now this man is paralyzed and this woman is taking care of him. He is in a terrible situation now, but the life 20 years that they lived, a disaster. So you see, this is a big confusing situation. Is sabr the way out? Is facing it? And those women who contest it literally turn mental cases. I have so many known friends who live munafiq, literally we would call hypocrites in their own life. They have a dirty reality at home and they put up a brave front morning and they leave. Yes, after 50 these men have reformed. My batchmates, my neighbors, so many people I know, they are double-faced people. I mean, I'm perplexed. My closest people whom I know so well, educated women in our society, are getting beaten up. और ये जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हमारी सोसाइटी में है ना, आई मे बिकम इमोशनल, हमारे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जो है ना, ये रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है हमारे बिहेवियर में. ये वर्क प्लेस का ही सिर्फ टेंशन नहीं है. Men are not able to combat other relationships, and for breaking of the home, the woman is held fitna. And women who are educated, permitten likmitten zananan chudya magdolmut. This is a very common. I'm not neither a feminist nor a pro this, pro that. I'm a very neutral person. A realistic approach. I'm confused. I just don't know. Religion says one thing, reality says one thing. They say educated hai to better hai. I'm perplexed. I'm frustrated with the reality that I see around. But being a Muslim, we have to be optimistic. But I don't know who is there to give a panache, to give a to solve this. I went to Maulvi Umar. And he also said, we will try our best, but nothing is happening. Educated, uneducated, semi-educated. There was a woman the other day, I gave her a lift across this lake road. I live across this road. She was having a severe headache. I said, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying? She said, मैं आज सुबह doctor से लेते health center है यहाँ पे. I'm sorry if I'm getting a little emotional. तो दोपहर मैंने lift दी. She said, I had a headache. I asked my husband for 300 rupees. He said, he slapped me like anything. And then I started crying. I said, where will I get the money? So shuk mein dinu bolte to what? Then ultimately gave her 200. But the violence that this is part of. I've seen this, and I've seen this all around me. I don't know where to seek a solution to religion, society, and what can we do?
She's asking She's Zina, Sayyid Zina.
Thank you, Sabirji, for your comments, and I feel for you, and I know what you mean. And thank you, Zinat, for your comment and question. I think I illustrated throughout my examples that there isn't a single instance of women being deficient in their aql, and the reasoning for forwarding this kind of an inane argument is generally with reference to the production of witnesses in the Qur'an. And again, as I said, that is completely related to economic transactions. Please bear that in mind. If a woman's testimony, in the case of accusations of unchastity, supersede the testimony of a man, how can a woman be naqs al-aql when it comes to other silly decisions? That would be my very simple answer to you. So I don't buy that, and anyone who does needs to check their own intellect.
Professor Bashir is also.
Hello, Adi Sahab. Are you ready?
This is the last. Okay, please.
Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, so it will.
Hello.
You introduce yourself, please.
Hello.
My friend Professor Abdul Majid Khan Sahab mentioned about this, so I wish to just come. As a profession, I'm from a altogether different field.
Thank you. Welcome.
आपकी स्ट्रीम किसकी?
I'm from software engineering.
Wonderful.
So maybe you already spoken. I didn't hear that. My question is two parts to that, you madam. One is, we know what the current state is. Where do we start from correcting this? Number one. Number two, the second part of the question, and you have been West doesn't have this problem in this shape. Maybe when I say West, I may not be necessarily referring to the Muslims in West, and non-Muslims including, predominantly non-Muslims. What are the things that the women in West, when I say women in West, I'm not saying Muslim women in West, general, women in West, the approach that they have taken maybe over the years would solve this particular shape of the problem for them. What of that would be relevant to us, for our women to adopt, and what of that would be solving one problem but getting into two? What would be those areas that could just shed some light on that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. To your first part, the only solution to our problems is educating ourselves. And by educating ourselves, I mean getting the right education, not picking up not following people who give us a distorted understanding of Islam. I think it's about, many of us have PhDs, and I'm talking about women, that have never really cared to understand and study Islam on their own. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. And I think the responsibility falls on the shoulders of women themselves. Often women have learned Islam either from their fathers or uncles or imams or, somebody said so and so. So when you ask, where did you learn this? They will always say, whatever. There's always a male reference. So that's one. The second part of your question is a very interesting one.
What does it mean practically for
Sure. Start a discussion group. Sit down. Bring together all the Quranic verses that speak about gender relations and history month was years of enlightenment, which in the West or in Western history is referred to as the Dark Ages. The so-called Dark Ages were not Dark Ages for us as Muslims, but of course we read Western history and we think that is Dark Ages. The reason we thrived, and the Islamic scholars here will have a lot more to say about that, is because there was constant engagement. So the point is constant engagement and asking the question. Sunday synagogue. It's an interesting point, at least I think so. Yehud bachas shivana moj, te kya sawal purchas. Ishthana almost insanas qatl karit agar sawal purchas. Zyadatar agar su sawal aase or yor. Nose bila, tem shu tut khof trawan su bach ke sawal. Su aise konas mas daimedam su get. So we killed engagement. Ashitut khof, Allah Ta'ala has promised the preservation of Qur'an. Allah Ta'ala has also promised the preservation of Islam. Ashitutah kamzor panis imanas mans ki ashbasa agar is karavna lur hafsarni discipline Islami guys khatam. That's not the case. Islam is safe. The Qur'an is safe. Allah is the guardian for all of this. And nachi ye tuhus kam ta nachi main kam kas hidayat din. It's not me. Allah says to the Prophet ﷺ, you do what you are supposed to do. Rest you leave up to me. Right? So I think we need to be honest. We need to be truthful. As I said in the beginning of my lecture, perhaps you missed it, I want us to go back to the initial and most important and core objective of our teaching, which is justice. Even when it is against doesn't matter. But at least you would have heard, at least, agar main tuta taqat aase, bhavan pose, but this pet marnas chunu kahti marna khadra. So I think that's where it is. Behaviors, caregivers, let's all, women and men, sit down, hash out these, let's talk about this issue. Let's talk about this. I work and have done this for decades in the West. I've created a program called Safe Families. What it is a 3-day workshop for imams and social workers, anybody who is in knowing and learning how Islam is an anti-oppressive, how violence does not have any justification in Islam. One of the Quranic military daif hadith. The zanan right? And this is very reality of our time. As I said, अगर तुम बाइक अडॉप्ट करने खतर तैयार इंसान हवा सोचो कहानी मन बने क्या try being Zanan कमजोर even worse. Zanan कमजोर you know, don't say a woman is weak. Don't tell me a woman is sensitive. Let men become sensitive. If you have a bit of sensitivity, you will try and understand and have a bit of empathy for what we go through. Zanan chuvaya weapon ban. And it should be that way. One set has a very sawal. Talked about is it the business of the West to save Muslim women? I mean, that's a whole thing that I teach, but that's not really the topic. 1 in every 5 women in Canada, where I'm currently residing, and 1 out of every 4 women in the United States is assaulted every minute. So to say that we've made progress in terms of violence against women is a misnomer. Such intimate partner violence, all sorts of other. So they haven't overcome these problems. We have nothing to really learn from them.
There is comparative view of how do you...
The statistics as far as Muslims living in the West are equally the same. So unfortunate. You know, the rate of divorce is the same, rate of violence is the same. You know, so we cannot stand on a higher pedestal just because we're Muslims. Even though we could if we adopted the teachings that Islam has given us. But we have absolutely no self-righteous claim to, please get out of your mind. We try to put other societies, other communities, let's worry about ourselves. Let's leave them. Let them figure it out. You know, Sabir is talking about broken families. How many of you know we have broken families? Sabir ji, you know, something that you said has stayed in my mind. When we're trying to solve these family violence issues. Because of my children, right? I mean, how many of you know about the wheel of domestic violence? We hold in great esteem. I don't know how many of you know about
So, as you in your own speech towards the end said that there's a lot of generalization happening, and maybe there are some exceptions, and the whole society may not be actually held responsible for some particular incidents. My question to you, very small and short and brief, is that the explanation that you have given and the problem as you have presented it and the solution that you have suggested, it's all welcome. But I wonder why it has not happened before. And why is it now we are discussing it, maybe so many centuries later? And during all this period, all these wrongs have happened. The oppression, people have been oppressed. And the women folk, they have been subjected to all sorts of violence. So why nobody has been able to come to the rescue of the people, the oppressed ones? And why it's now that we are realizing, and now you say that we have to reclaim those characters, those ideal characters. Go in the Quranic, this thing, so there are women, Quran uses different words for describe a woman. You use it in Nisa al-Quran, then there is Mar'a, then there is Sahiba. So we don't want to go into that. But briefly, if you can respond to this small query.
I don't think we are now, we are not, how many of you are familiar with Hukuk al-Niswan? Anybody? You are? Who's the author?
I don't know about the book, I just know about the book.
Okay. So in 1895, there was a book that was published, Hukuk al-Niswan, and if you don't know about it, check it out. It's available online. One of the projects I have, inshallah, if I have life, is to translate it. How many of you know of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan? I assume everybody does, right? Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan had a student. He was an imam, he was a Muslim scholar. His name was Mumtaz Ali. Mumtaz Ali was Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan's student, and his research was on women. And his book is about women, Muslim women. See, the fact that all of you, many of you, yes, of course, at the same time. So same time. So at the same time, what was happening with what was happening in Egypt with Huda Sharawi, what was happening in Egypt with many of the other Islamic movements, it was exact same time it was happening in Aligarh as well. The fact that we don't know about Mumtaz Ali says something. Mumtaz Ali's document, in my mind, is the first male feminist manifesto, and I highly encourage you all to read it. He's the first male modern-day feminist. Of course, for me, as a Muslim, the first feminist of Islam is the Prophet ﷺ. So Mumtaz Ali, in that time, wrote that book. And guess who opposed him? Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan. He thought it was too dangerous. He thought it was too much for the society at that time because they would, there would be an uproar. One of the things that I hold against Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, even though he started Aligarh Muslim universities, he still didn't let women in. So it's just, think about that. And by the way, I have to tell you this. I just came across in my archives something called the Kashmir Gazette. My historians here will know about that. From 1910, I have it in my collection. And I was reading some of these essays in Urdu. And I just learned, much to my surprise and pleasant surprise, Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan's mother was a Kashmiri. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And everything that Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan learned about social justice was from this mother. And her story is an interesting one. But anyways, that was just an aside.
Actually, just a small supplementary to it. Actually, that's one small thing, because then it will remain otherwise incomplete. You, in your own presentation, said, you actually explained it. You referred to engagement, you referred to ijtihad. You said that ijtihad, when the engagement stopped, and then the problem arose from there. My question is that, what was the situation prior to that? So maybe not in this
Yes,
session.
no. What I'm saying is that we have forgotten.
Was everything fine?
No, nothing. It has never been fine. It has never been fine.
Because we have to go into the history and see where from it started.
From the very beginning. From the very beginning. Read Professor Akram Nadwi's Al-Muhadditha, right? So he thought he was going to write one volume as his PhD thesis. 40 volumes later, he's still writing about it. Who were the teachers? I mean, those of you women, educate yourselves about who were the teachers of some of the greatest male scholars in Islam. They were women. They used to travel from Syria to Al-Quds, as the gatherings, as the universities. Using Masjid, there's no concept. Masjid is not a prayer space. In Islamic history, a masjid is a space for vibrant discussions and gatherings and engagement. And in those spaces, women used to teach. We have killed our tradition. Let alone be a teacher. So anyways, that's a whole different topic. That's right. Qayraween, yes, the first university of the world, not in Islam, was Al-Qayraween. That was created by a Muslim woman. Thank you for reminding me. I think there are two students who are waiting.
Online, many people, we have Professor Bashir is coming, we have Mr. Parvez Ahmed, we have one lady again, and we have Mr. Manzoor Ahmed Khan. He has raised his hand. He is the father of our.
To Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, including Hawa, Bilqis, and Maryam. Hajra.
Yeah, all these women are shown or described as weak.
This one, that you color too.
I think there's also universal and at the same time shaped by different socio-cultural factors. Now can promote gender justice across different cultures and religions.
Please.
Very two quick brief answers to this. You need to we need to have an absolute separation between Islam and society. So if we want to proclaim, if we want to reclaim our faith, separate the one from cultural practices. Sometimes we often get confused. Islam is culture, and I mean I could give you instances from our women traditions, for example. Anyways, we won't go there. The point is, a culture has, every society, every community has culture, and I'm not denying that there aren't cultural representations of Islam, but if we get understand the exact of our faith, go back to the Quran. Please, just go back to the Quran. Set aside interpretations for a while. We have our brains, and I don't think there's anything that you will find. Challenge me. Find anything in the Quran that in any way holds patriarchy, misogyny, or oppression. I will take that challenge happily.
Okay.
That you shouldn't advocate. Of course, we all have a job to do. But as far as the crooked rib story, I completely deny that. That is
because of the academic engagements of students.
We'll have to organize a lecture just on it, so I can address that question, my dear But Salamat there are gradations of feminism, and there's a whole field of Islamic feminism. A couple of talks of small on YouTube if you want them out, because I don't have to go through all of this over here. But happy to connect you further about that.
I have
a question regarding from first century and to the modern times.
Political reason for that. Yes. So, अगर वह क्या होगा यम सातन अब्बास दौरान तम सातन तम which was Islam was choose at the tip of the sword and all of that, and many Muslims by Islam. That's not the case. But what we do have to be clear about is the expansion of the Muslim empire was an imperialist project. You cannot deny that. It has nothing to do with Islam. Okay? So let's keep that simple. As part of that imperialist project, the rulers of the time needed to engage with and promote scholars that were in conformity with the way they wanted to rule. So slowly, women scholars, So what that did is it preserved some of the essential Muslim scholarship, which again, thanks to scholars like Professor, now we get to read about. That we're not part of it or have not been part of it, that's the case. how much time do I have? I have a but I will add to your point. Chinas Manas, right? Islam preserves the Mushkil project, two issues of Mushkil project. But there are close to 200 million plus in China by a conservative estimate. That can go to Islam preserve, not men. So I encourage you again to look and read about Muslim female imams in China. They're called ahungs. Tachin Marad. Timaichi imam karan, timaichi namaz se parnawa, timaichi da. They do everything. Because when the men community were subjugated to tyranny and oppression, it's the women and continue to do that. I think what we need to do is open our eyes to what the women have been doing globally, right? And what they're continuing to do globally. I think Nasser said why. I mean, Islamic studies scholarship has had a shift in the last 30 years that's non-existent because we were dependent on endless imperialist, colonial-minded scholars who were defining Islam for us. So we want to look at women who have claimed Islam, look at their scholarship, and continue to see upcoming, all of you here who are contributing and will continue to contribute. Just take this out of my mind, women didn't make that contribution. So they're there, we just don't know about it. I have a class to teach, which starts at 8 a.m.
I can understand there are many dimensions of gender justice in Islam. One can give different aspects. So you have told, with a very rarely talked about Quran and women are indicated in Quran. But another important thing is all of us should agree to highlight more. Domestic life, but also in the social aspect of it. Allowing women to come participate.
Yep.
Sometimes we discussion coming to war, to participate in war and all.
Thank you so much, Professor.
There are so many factors.
Yes.
I think that will be more impactful on.
Well, I think
this part is also.
I do this purposely. I always separate the period from the Quran, and there's a reason for that. So when people say, no, this might be in the Quran, but in this hadith and in the Sirah, such and such. Let's take the example of when people say that it's in the Quran and says, blah, 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 then so what does that make it? That makes it a Quranic commandment. Allah is directing that women should be beaten.
But then should have
exactly. Did our Prophet who the Quran, he imposed that commandment if it was a commandment? He had to. Let's remember that. The Prophet had numerous situations with our blessed mothers, but did he go to implementing that commandment if it is a commandment? I think Suri says to Etinas, don't maintain him panun damag istemal kar. In fact, son damag, logic, reasoning, the Quran Sharif, kari baki cheezon se conflict. I think it's safe to say go with your reasoning and go with the Quran. So let's not drag unnecessary things in that justify injustice. There's absolutely no need for it. I think for which we need something that are not very clear to us. There are lots of mashal things in the Quran for which we need to look at what scholars say, how did they interpret this, and so on and so forth. But we also have to say, what times are we living in? Thinking I have a
in and say, how do I justify the ethics of this? You should earn 10,000. That's why we need this constant engagement. Is artificial insemination okay? Is surrogate motherhood okay? Do we just ignore childless couples and let them be? How do we deal with issues of mortgage and, loans? And so I think we have to, Islam is a very, very progressive religion. Islam is a religion that allows us to adapt and use our reasoning. But I think we have locked Islam up, and we have completely locked our minds up. You were free to disagree with me, absolutely. And that's the beauty of engagement. Magar, I think I'll end with this. Allah has created us in Allah's image. I don't want to say his or her because there is no gender for Allah. Yes, but I think what we have to be careful about, is characterizing Allah in our image, and that's what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Idrisa Pandit, for your scholarly talk, scholarly as well as inspiration, particularly the post-talk scholarly responses. Subsequently also came to know that she is, we somewhere we converge in thinking without having interacted with each other. That is having some bent of mind. So naturally, this is the most cementing force. Anyway, I wish. Chunki I don't have any ABC knowledge about the subject, and I rarely come to university for my own reasons, because honor is very, very important. So when you will also complete your tenure, you will also hesitate coming to this place, because perhaps people will start thinking the person is coming for some employment. But when Professor Khaki, he's a friend of mine, otherwise I cannot say no to him. But when he told me that such and such person is coming. I thought, let me go and expose myself. But I should not miss the lecture. I should not miss the lecture. It would have been a great loss to me. And I hope that this will blaze a trail for a very serious discussions, on important societal issues, which this center has ignored, perhaps narrowing the focus down to very limited subjects. It will be a great honor to the personality in whose name this institution has been, this center has been instituted. If we are as much concerned about society as Sheikh Nuruddin Nurani Rahmatullah was during his period and also for subsequent generations. Anyway, Professor Idrisa Pandit she has to attend some other important assignment, and I am also not qualified to speak on this. But the most important takeaway of this lecture is that I was in fact come with this idea that probably she may speak of the challenges we have from outside. But the discussion, the last part of the discussion, which Professor Mufti brushed upon, is that we don't have challenge without challenge. We have challenges within also, both within and without. We have not only challenges from we were not having, at one point of time we had challenges from colonialists, now neo-colonialism, and also from other sides also. But we have also challenges from within. So it's to respond to the challenges from those who want to use it as a trope to subjugate us. It is very important that we do a serious research on this subject. And this is the responsibility of the women scholars, scholar activists. I wish that large number of our students attend this lecture, or you may organize another where you ensure that more and more women scholars participate so that they get, this is a very, very critical issue. It is being used, rather misused, to enslave us. It is not simply a narrative, because no Western narrative can be without politics or without having the agenda or to perpetuate their hegemony. We must be very, very clear. Slavishly or innocently, our students say that we were oppressed, we were subjugated, all that language that they use. So very important is, and what is important for that? Because it should be as serious study as these people do, prompting us, rather forcing us to follow them as our role models. We use those models, we use those theories. Without using those theories, our papers are not considered standard papers. Nobody will publish if it doesn't reflect all those narratives and discourses. So our job is to do serious exercise. And serious exercise is not possible unless we are informed of all the perspectives, all the narratives, all these challenges also. All perspectives and narratives and challenges, and we should simultaneously be also well versed, thorough in the sources, and in their own language or in their, we have to respond to that. That's very, very important, because this time अगर कोई बहाना नहीं आता तो ये बहाना आता है, इसलिए ये बहुत ही important है, very important this thing. And so far as within challenges जो हैं, देखिए मैं आपको बताऊं, it is a very complex issue. Because ultimately it deals with human beings. Human beings के साथ जो भी related issues हैं वो बड़े complex होते हैं, complex. It is not physical science, जहाँ आपको एक theory है and you generalize that theory. Every person is a theory. And even Foucault, अगर हम if I quote Foucault, कहते that one single individual is not stable. He is composed of so many contradictory instincts that you cannot even theorize him. You cannot explain. There is crisscrossed instincts in one person. You cannot. So when the human society is the complexity of the complexities, how can you generalize it? She says mentally, yes, it may be the case of so many. There may be some economic factor. Yes, it may be. There may be so many other. So contextual, context-free generalizations are always misleading. You have to contextualize the things. Every person has its own story. And it's also very important, as Madam said, that it needs a collective action also. And see why there is domestic alliance. Every individual micro study. It's not simple. Neither education, nor secular education, or religious education, or economic conditions can explain this complex situation. It may be different people have different stories. Different stories. You see, it is also very important. Sometimes when I have not educated my child about what is right and what is wrong, what is halal and what is haram, what happens? That his director becomes shaitan. Because that khana is open for a shaitan to inhabit. So we are shaitan-directed people. We become shaitan-directed people. So what is very, very important, कि shaitan के बदले आप इसको spirituality से आप उसको you place it there. ताकि that you are God-directed. You are God-fearing. See, I will tell you, there are cases, Madam said, no doubt, she said, those professional Maulvis, doing something which is unexpected from them. They must be role models what is Islam. But it is also a fact that sometimes, and not sometimes, generally, I advise people that look for a religious person because there is safety rather than a person who materialistic, that he should have bungalow, he should have this position, he should have that position. He will weigh you, he will assist you in that materialistic scale. So once, और किसी का खूबसूरती तो हमेशा नहीं रहती है, किसी की इकोनॉमिक पोजीशन हमेशा ठीक नहीं रहती है, मगर जो गॉड फियरिंग होगा, अगर आप if you lose everything, still he will respect, because अल्लाह ने उसको सिखाया है कि इंसाफ, ह्यूमैनिटी, इंसान, वो अल्लाह का खौफ जो है उस इंसान में, वो हमदर्दी, वो सेंटिमेंट, वो इंसानियत का सेंटिमेंट ऊपर आता है. अदरवाइज इंसान दो एलिमेंट्स है इंसान में, हैवानी भी है और इंसानियत भी है. So if you want to cultivate human instincts, so give the same environment. If you want that animality that haywaniyat should promote, give the same environment, तो haywaniyat जो है वो उभरेगी और आपकी जो आपका असली रूह जो है, मतलब जो spiritual sentiment है वो दब जाएगा इसके अंदर. So मेरा मतलब ये है कि it also needs scholarly study, case study. No generalization. इसके लिए और फिर collective action. It needs scholar activist. The scholar should be activist also. ये political science वाले, ये भी एक स्कूल, क्या है डॉक्टर साहब उसका स्कूल का नाम है, जहाँ वो advocate करते थे कि scholar को activist भी होना चाहिए. If scholar is not activist, it has no significance. So case studies are very important. Case studies are very important, and then collective action is very important. और जहाँ ये भी एक फैक्ट है, ये में सिर्फ चाय सुन ये पेतलस चाय की ही शुरू सुन दवा या शुरू सुन वर्दी की ही फी सुन की ही आप गरस में लड़ाई थी कसम, ये भी फैक्ट है. उसको जहाँ ये है, यही ऐसी हालत है, तो इट इज आवर रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, कलेक्टिव रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, हम जाएं. और जहाँ सब कुछ है फिर भी हैवान इंसान बन गया है, तो ये हमारी रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. हम सोशल इंजीनियरिंग कर लेंगे, वहां हम उसको कन्विंस कर लेंगे, हम कोशिश करेंगे, हम किस तरह से नसाया बनेंगे, किस तरह से हालात, ये भी जरूरी है. इसलिए ये सारी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट, जहां हमें एक्सटर्नल डेंजर जो है, एक्सटर्नल खतरा, उसके लिए भी स्कॉलरली रेस्पॉन्स की जरूरत है, क्रिएटिव रेस्पॉन्स की जरूरत है. वहां हमें विदिन जो डेंजर्स है اس کے لیے بھی اسٹڈی بھی کرنی ہے اور ساتھ ہی اس کو اپنا وی ہیو ٹو کیور دا پرابلم آلسو. سو ود دیز ورڈس یہ تو میں نے جنرلی دیکھیے میں آپ کو بتاؤں گا میری پرسنل جو میں جنرلی کہتا ہوں کیونکہ دس از ناٹ ہوائی بات, یہ میں امپیریکل ایویڈنس کی بنیاد پر آپ سے کہہ رہا ہوں. عورت کا دشمن ہے ہماری سوسائٹی میں آپ کو بتاؤں گا. ایک منٹ میں آپ کو بتاؤں, یہ آپ میری ہی نہیں ہے, یہ آپ کو جنرل آپ کو لگے. ہشت نوش یہ پرابلم جو ہے نہ نوش مانا نش میں موج نہ ہش مانا نش میں کور حس. اگر یم ٹھیک گژھن, اگر ان کا دماغ ٹھیک ہو جائے گا فیملی ول بی ٹھیک, سماج ول بی ٹھیک. گۄڈٕ یمے ٹھیک گژھن کہین حظ, گۄڈٕ یمے ٹھیک گژھن. اچھا مرد تعاون زد سانی سوسائٹی میں یہ نہیں کہوں گا کہ سارے, میں یہ نہیں کہوں گا, کچھ تو ایسے بھی ہے نا وہ ہائی ہیڈڈ کیا ہے وہ لوگ, تو وہ ان کو چھوڑو, وہ دوز آر ایکسیپشنز. مگر جنرلی بات یہ ہے کہ یہ مرد ہوتا ہے یہ پر زنان ہندی بان, یہ ہپر تم زنان ہندی ہپر تم پہ دپان ہو پنہ زنان کر سپورٹ, یہ پنہ زنان کر سپورٹ. نہ اس لیے مطلب جہاں کریکشن عورتوں کے لیے یہ آپ کو لگے گا غلط, یہ آپ کو جہاں آپ فیمنزم کہے گا نا بات فیمنزم یہ آپ کو لگے گا, مگر بات مسئلہ حل نہیں ہو جائے گا. مسئلہ آپ پریکٹیکلی دیکھو, پریکٹیکلی اگر جہاں میں نے دیکھا کہ کنسٹرکٹیو تھنکنگ کی عورت بھی ہے, عورتیں ہیں دونوں, جو دو عورتیں گھر میں ہیں, 3 عورتیں گھر میں ہیں, کتنی عورتیں, اگر یہ بہنوں کی طرح یا ماں بیٹیوں کی طرح رہیں گے تو آپ دیکھ لیجیے ہر گھر میں اسے میں میں آپ کو کیس اسٹڈیز بتاؤں گا. اسے میں دپان بیٚنہِ گژھِ نہٕ یور یِنی, بیٚنہِ گژھِ نہٕ یور یِنی. ژٕ وَن تہٕ مےٚ کُس تاوَن ژھٕنہِ یہِ حظ, یہ کُس تاوَن ژھٕنہِ, کَتہِ روزِ وۄنۍ اَتہِ حالات. اَہن أمِس چھِ راتھ تانۍ ٲسمٕژ بیٚنہِ, بوٗزِو تُہۍ, یہِ چھِ حقیٖقت. وٕچھ حظ اگر فیمنِزم پَرٕنۍ ہوتہِ کِتابہٕ تہٕ پَتہٕ گوٚو اکھ یوٚتانۍ وٕچھِو انگریز تہِ چھِ وۄنۍ وَنان کہِ پرٛٮ۪کٹِکٔلی وٕچھِو حالات, وٕچھِو فیٖلڈ سٹڈی کٔرِو, ایکچُوَل فیکٹٕس أنِو برونٛٹھ کُن. یِم انگریزی یِم جرگانہٕ مہ لگٲیِو, پریکٹیکلی مےٚ اوس اکھ پیپر, میں نے کچھ کتاب لکھی تو اور اوس یہ کومنٹ آمُت سُہ ڈائریکٹ فیکٹن پٮ۪ٹھ, مہ لاگہو یہِ اورٕ یورٕ وَنُن کِہیٖنۍ حظ, تھیریٖز ویریٖز حظ. اچھا یہ فیکٹ ہے, یہ ون یہ بیٚنہِ یُس راتھ تانۍ یہ بیٚنہِ ٲس نہٕ أمِس بٲیِس بغٲر, یہِ اوس آسان أمِس اوس تپھ کھسان, ہۄس تراوان ہۄ ٲس مران أمِس برونٛٹھ حظ, أمِس اوس یہِ گژھان یہِ ٲس مران أمِس برونٛٹھ. یہِ ٲس پانہٕ أمۍ کوٚر اکھ کتھ, أمۍ دوٚپ نہ بہٕ پرٕ نہٕ کِہیٖنۍ, مےٚ کتہِ مول چھُ مےٚ اکھ ہتھ, مول کتہِ انہِ دۄن, بہٕ پرٕ نہٕ کِہیٖنۍ مگر بوے گژھِ مےٚ پرُن. ییٚمہِ سۭتۍ چھِ یہِ زنان سمجھ دپان یہِ گژھِ نہٕ یور یِنی حظ, وۄنۍ کتہِ روزن حالات ٹھیٖک حظ, وۄنۍ کتہِ روزن حالات ٹھیٖک. وٕچھ حظ یہِ ونُن زنان وتھِ دپہِ یِتھے پٲٹھۍ آسہِ مرد تہِ, مردس تہِ چھِ یِمے خطا, مردس تہِ چھِ یِمے خطا حظ. اس لیے یوٚتن تانٮ۪تھ نہٕ أسۍ گۄڈٕ انسان بنو حظ, انسان چھُ بڑُن امپارٹنٹ. ژٕ کانٛہہ سکھ چھُکا, ژٕ کرسچن چھُکا, ژٕ یہوٗد چھُکا, ژٕ مُسلمان چھُکا, ژٕ بیاکھ چھُکا, ژےٚ چھُ گۄڈٕ انسان بنُن انسان. ہے یہِ حظ چھُ مول, یہِ حظ چھُ موج, یہِ حظ چھُ بیٚنہِ, یہِ حظ چھُ بوے. ہیوٚر تہِ چھُ مےٚ تیُتھُے یُتھ مےٚ پنُن مول چھُ, ہش تہِ چھِ مےٚ تِژھٕے یُس مےٚ پنٕنۍ موج چھِ, ہورٕ تہِ زانہِ یورٕ تہِ زانہِ. وٕچھتو بہرٕے بہر. بہٕ وَنو تۄہہِ اکھ, مےٚ چھِ 2 نۄش چھِ مےٚ, 2 نۄش چھِ مےٚ. اکھ نۄش چھِ مےٚ نمبر 1 کیٹاگارِکل ونہٕ بہٕ, قرآنِ مجیٖد چھُم تُہنٛدِ کَنہِ. اگر مےٚ پنٕنۍ کوٗر تہِ چھِ تِژھ حظ, اگر مےٚ پنٕنۍ کوٗر تہِ چھِ, نہ حظ تٔمۍ کٔر نا ہش, اگر تُہنٛدِ ہش وٕچھاو نا تیٚلہِ گوٚژھ تتھ تِمنٕے دۄہن آسُن گوٚمُت ٹاس پٹاس حظ, تِمنٕے دۄہن گٔژھۍ یِم آسٕنۍ درٛٲمٕتۍ حظ. آز دپہِ ہے بہٕ نیرٕ نہٕ, بہٕ روزٕ نہٕ یتھ حالتن منٛز کینٛہہ. مگر تمہِ بدلو ہوتہِ میٲنۍ زنان تہِ بدلو تمہِ. شی پروڈ سو سیزنڈ, کیازِ تٔمِس ٲس پتہ یہِ چھُ پننِس مٲلِس کھۄتہٕ زیادٕ کران پیار حظ. تٔمۍ دوٚپ اگر وۄنۍ بہٕ یہِ کرٕ تیٚلہِ گژھِ ییٚمِس تہِ, یہِ تہِ گژھِ تیٚلہِ وِکٹِم بنہِ اَمہِ سۭتۍ. اچھا ہُہ یہ جانتا ہے اس کو. سٲنِس گرس منٛز چھُ بہر, تتہِ چھُنہٕ کانٛہہ پریشٲنی, تتہِ چھُنہٕ. مگر وٕچھ تہٕ وۄنۍ مےٚ اکھ کتھ, وٕچھ حظ یہِ چھُ اکھ, مےٚ ووٚن نہ یہِ چھُ کمپلیکس, یہِ چھُنہٕ تیوٗتاہ سمپل تہِ کینٛہہ. وۄنۍ زن آسہِ ہا پونٛسہٕ پرابلم, بہٕ ونہٕ ہا تٔمِس ہے پونٛسہٕ ژٕ دِ کینٛہہ, بس سۄ گژھِ ناراض حظ, کیازِ زنان چھِ یژھٲنی پونٛسہٕ دِنۍ حظ, انلیس سۄ الگ آسہِ, یوٚتانۍ نہٕ سۄ الگ آسہِ. وٕچھ حظ مےٚ دوٚپ یِم چھِ کمپلیکس اِشوٗز, سۄ چھنہٕ یژھان دِنۍ حظ. تہٕ اگر وۄنۍ وۄنۍ ٲسۍ أسۍ, بہٕ تہِ اوسُس, ہش تہِ ٲسٕس, دۄنوَے ٲسۍ اِکوَٹَے ٲسۍ ہٮ۪کھ, سۄ مانہِ ہا دَپہِ سۄ دی ہا نہٕ پونٛسہٕ کینٛہہ, اَسہِ گژھِ یپٲرۍ ما اَسہِ حالات آسن نا خراب, मुमकिन तीस मे रोजान क्या बह डिपेंडेंट मेस तनखास पे हेको 5 बस गुजारित बे शहरस मज बह डिपेंडेंट गो यह सिंपल तो कम्प्लेक्स अत हम चीज तम चीज मगर सबसे ज्यादा इंसानियत इंसानियत दीन हेचन दीन इत मैडम ने जस्टिस यह जस्टिस जस्टिस सोन रुख दीन रुख जस्टिस अथ पे ज्यादा लिटरेचर मिडिवलस पे अथ इंसाफस पे क्या वन ना अत क्या वन इंसाफस पे अदलस पे अदलस पे ज्यादा लिटरेचर आमत लेखन इंसाफ इंसाफ गो इंसाफ यह मोल यह मोज यह कूर अच्छा वन तो यह नौश आई अम सोरे त्रयित जस्ट 1 मिनट अम सोरे त्रयित अम मोल त्रयित अम मोज त्रयित अम बेन त्रयित अम बोय त्रयित अम त्रो स्पेस अगर अमे ब्रो पर्सनल यह मतलब इम्पेरिकल वन अगर मे मोज अल्लाह ताला जन्नत बेनिस लक्ष्य खानदर कर हालात घर खराब अच्छा पे जन मोज फ्रिक्वेंटली बेमार पे अगर कस रिश्तेदार कोर वन ना दित बत मिल रनित सह टेंगलन पे टेंगलन यह घर त्रयित वह यह वन बेस गरस मज यह कौत इंसानियत अमिस पे कोर 10 गन मोहब्बत दिन अम कौत कुर्बानी दित अम कौत कुर्बानी दित अमिस 10 गन मोहब्बत दिन अगर इधर उधर कर कल तम थोत not to nausea but hashti sonchan hash अमूमन they forget their past they forget their past अगर मेरे वक्त की ये गोमत ऐसे बासा तेलियर गरस मैं ऐसे खबर क्या करमत ये सिंपल होत पड़ा इस फेमिनिज्म इट पड़ा या खाई ऐसे ये मसला नहीं होगा हमको दीन अपना है यही बनवा होता हमारा दीन पर चलो और दीन पर चला और आप देख लो बाहर ही बाहर होगा थैंक यू वेरी मच
So, thank you, sir. So, only 2 minutes to bear with me. So, wonderful, presentation as a chairman of the session. So, kind of you, sir, for wonderful observations, explanations. So, I just, extend my warm vote of thanks to our distinguished scholar, Professor Idrisa Pandit. We are so fortunate that she has been with us and she has responded positively to our request to be with us in spite of many things that she might have at home. So I'm highly obliged, madam. I wish that if at all it's not possible for her to be with us, on offline mode, we will just request you, the madam, to please kindly be us with for some another session. Maybe it's only on online mode, so that will facilitate our students and all those who are interested with such type of studies. So thank you very much, madam, for being with us, for gracing the occasion with your presence. And then Professor Mohammed Ashrafani, the former dean of the school, of the former dean academic affairs, for being with us. So kind of you, sir. You are always source of inspiration to one and all, to the students during your tenure as professor of Department of History, then as the dean of the faculty, then as dean of academic affairs. In all these capacities, you have been a source of inspiration, love and encouragement to one and all who all know and who all aspire for something to promote their academic excellence. So and then Professor Nur Muhammad Baba, sir, the former head, and everybody. Vote of thanks to the scholars on the dais and off the dais, and the scholars from Center for Shaikh-ul Studies, and then our distinguished, wonderful, my daughters, my son from the Department of Psychology. I'm grateful to you. We already know you, and finally you had made it to be with us. So thank you very much. You had left everything at home in the department, and you had came here. So kind of you. And then Mirza Sahab, both of Mirzas. So I'm highly obliged to one and all. So, but before I conclude, the last two, we have many people who had made most of the comments on online basis. We could not respond to one and all. I'm sorry that because of the paucity of time, we could not just respond to all of you. I apologize, and I'm sure that whatever the observation you had, we can just contact us. We can just, extend you the contact number of our distinguished scholar. You have many things in mind. You can just ask her and interact with her at your leisure time. Anytime you can just talk to her. There's not necessarily that you will ask anything in the seminar hall. Many things can be. Will thank you. Special Professor Kawa from Sopur, Professor M.A. Bhatt, HOD Islam Studies, Professor Bashir, former Chairman, Center for Shaikh-ul Studies, Professor Athar Jamil-e Islamia, Professor Farhat Nasreen Jamil-e Islamia, Dr. Nazrul Islam, Dr. Nazir Ahmad Zarga, Central University of Kashmir, Sayyid Zinat, Dr. Kamrul Nisad, Mr. Manzoor Kant, he is the father of our distinguished faculty, Idris Kant. Thank you very much. He had in fact raised his hand to ask something, but because of the paucity, we could not actually give you the time for that. Then it is Qazi Iram, Sayyid Sahar, Mr. Parvez Ahmad, Dr. Riyaz Ahmad Nayak, Sam Nisa, Loon Jamshed, Dr. Afshana Rashid, Anayat Asad. All these scholars, many more, I may have just missed many, but these are the people who have been with us all these 2.5 hours. So I am highly obliged to you, grateful to you. Thank you with folded hands for your patience to be with us, encouraged us with your presence. I am sure the next presentation, inshallah, will be, we would like to have you with us for all such occasions. The next presentation will be the next Saturday. Maybe we will just request Professor Muhammad Ashrafani, if at all it is possible for him, something that will be more feasible and relevant to our students, and he will speak on some theme of Kashmir, Professor Muhammad Ashrafani. So with these words, I am highly obliged, especially to my faculty members, so Dr. Ilham, who has made all this possible, and Dr. Khan Sahab, Dr. Fayaz Sahab, everybody who was here, all those office members who are here. So thank you very much for your presence. So kind of you, God bless you.
Thank you very much, everyone.